Thank you, Keith. Well, today we are going to be doing something different. I had mentioned it on Facebook a week ago and then completely forgot it. In fact, I forgot it until Donna sent me a little reply, which was, what was the experiment? So here's the experiment. So today we're going to try to be more interactive. I'm calling it an interactive sermon, is my concept. To do that, our sermon is going to be, at least today, it's going to be video. Hopefully in the future we're going to try doing the Facebook Live thing, see how that works. But here's the way I want it to be interactive with you. As you're hearing God speak to you today, so you can pull out all of your different social media devices that you have. And as you hear God speaking to you today, maybe you want to text something. Don't text your friend like, what are you doing for lunch, that type of thing. But maybe text some of your friends or put it on your own Facebook account. Something God's saying to you within the sermon. Maybe you want to tweet it if you do that. Maybe you want to use Instagram or some of those other social media concepts or things that are out there. But basically something that God is saying to you as you're hearing God speak to you through Acts chapter 1 today. So here's an example. You could do this sort of to get into the swing of things. A statement I made last week. Discipleship is the DNA of the church. So you can just type in somewhere, put on your social media thing, discipleship, the DNA of the church. Make sense? You with me? You can pull out, you don't have to, yes you do want to keep them silent, but pull them out and let's see what type of interaction we can get here as we try to be more interactive as a church. So today we are starting a new sermon series. We're going to be meandering through the book of Acts. I say meandering because we're not going to hit every chapter. We're not going to hit every verse. We're going to meander. You know what that means, hopefully. And we're going to meander through the book of Acts as we unpack some first century breakthroughs that hopefully help transform us and our church here in the 21st century. Now, very interesting, in Acts chapter 1, or just all of Acts, Luke, as he describes things in Acts, he doesn't give you sort of a paint-by-number type of guide. And instead, what Luke does is he gives you the unvarnished truth. You know, like Ananias and Sapphira, remember that one? Like, you would have probably written that a little differently than it was written in the book of Acts. But he just gives you the unvarnished truth there, the unvarnished story of that early church. And as they learn to follow Jesus and his mission. Because remember, all of Acts is the follow-up or the follow-through of Jesus simply saying, go and make disciples. And then they went out and did it. And they had no manual. They had no guidebook. And so by looking closely here at what I call the turning points that God uses to shape their DNA back then, hopefully we're going to discover our DNA. And hopefully we're going to discover our own DNA and its revolutionary power to transform us and to transform our church. And see how it impacts our lives. So if you have your Bibles or your, there you go, different types of media that's out there, different types of devices. If you have that, turn to Acts chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. You can pull out your sermon notes. They are in your bulletin, so to follow along as we look at what Jesus here tells us about the power of mission. But before we look at the word of the Lord, let's spend a moment talking to the Lord of the Word. Let's pray. Father, thank you again for the privilege of diving into your word. The privilege of unpacking your word here in the 21st century. Your word that was written many, many years ago, but is still relevant for us today. Father, give us eyes that see. Help our minds to understand. Help our hearts to be changed so that we can join you in this mission that you call every disciple to be on. And then help us to use our hands and our body in ways that go out and get involved in declaring your mission. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, how many of you remember the movie Braveheart? Anyone besides me?
My favorite.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay. Now let me just say that the main point of that movie was that without a cause worth dying for, gotta add that in there, without a cause worth dying for, we don't have a cause worth living for. That was basically the theme for me as I looked at Braveheart. Without a cause worth dying for, we don't have a cause worth living for. Now let me say, as Jesus' disciples, that cause for us is the redemptive agenda of Jesus. The redemptive agenda of Jesus that should shape our lives and our mission as his people. Because at the center of who we are as Jesus' disciples is a God-sized mission, which is simply to be and to make disciples. In fact, it's so important that this is the starting point where Luke tells the story of the early church. Likewise, hopefully, the church that we long to be involved in, the church that we long to see God do something in, isn't just a pipe dream. But the journey, my friends, towards it begins with, I believe, a very renewed clarity about the nature of our mission as a church. In fact, when Luke here picks up his pen to write this story here, and started writing what we know as the book of Acts, he devotes page 1 to answering the question of what matters most. Thus, Luke here opens his story by showing that Jesus' final act before his ascension into heaven was to declare our central priority as the people who bear his name. In fact, Jesus chose you and me. He chose us to carry his message, to carry his method of hope and life and healing out into a desperate world that desperately needs it. And he chose you and I to tell this story. And so he says, I'm giving you a Billings paraphrase here. Here's what he says: live as my witnesses. Live as my witnesses from here to the ends of the earth, and I will empower you through my Holy Spirit as you are going. In other words, and this may be something you want to send out to your social media. In other words, you and I are the agents of his redemptive plan. You and I are the agents of his redemptive plan. Well, what I want to do is I want to start here by intertwining the backstory with the current story. Because there's always a backstory as you look at Luke and as he describes the book of Acts. And I say that because in order to fully appreciate the weight of Jesus' words in that day when he penned them, we need to step back into the backstory. We need to step back into the backstory that's surrounding the events that we read about in Acts chapter 1. And so what I want you to do for a moment is try to put yourself in the shoes of Jesus' disciples as they've been with Jesus. If you want to close your eyes and do this, that's fine. Just don't fall asleep. But let's think for a moment, step back in time, and be one of Jesus' disciples. And as you do that, here's what you're going to be thinking about. For 3 years now, you have traveled the length and the breadth of this country as a tight-knit group of disciples of Jesus. You spent time in the homes of the rich, and you spent time in the homes of the poor. You spent time in the presence of lepers and of outcasts. You even heard the words of God spoken in real time. You saw miracles happening. You saw demons being cast out. In fact, everything about your life, your relationships, your interests, your destiny changed during those 3 years that you were with Jesus. But then on one Friday, 40 days ago, all that collapsed. After spending almost 3 years with Jesus, everything collapsed. You witness now the trauma, the horrors of Jesus' crucifixion. And you witnessed it firsthand. You didn't just hear about it. You were there. And now you spend a week hiding while the nation is celebrating the death of Jesus. And you fear that at any moment, a knock on the door would mean you're next. Throughout the city now, filled with crowds, you and your friends are hiding in the shadows, whispering among each other. And Sunday comes. And the resurrection of Jesus changes everything. And now, in the past few days since the resurrection, you and other close followers of Jesus, you sense something's about to happen. And no one can put their finger on it, but those tentative conversations start to happen among you. And then in the presence and with the conversations that you have with Jesus, it's clear that something is about to change again. And then while sharing a meal with you, Jesus starts to speak. He starts to speak about waiting in Jerusalem. About waiting in Jerusalem for a promised gift. And being baptized in the Holy Spirit. Now, fast forward to today, where we're all sitting here in a sanctuary. I say that because over 2,000 years later now, all of us know that the ascension was about to take place as you read Luke chapter 1. In fact, I believe we become so familiar with the basic New Testament story that we're looking at that I believe it almost makes it impossible to hear these events with fresh ears. I say that because those disciples on that first day, there were no clues about what was going to really happen. Again, remember, everything that was happening to them was happening in real time. It was just happening. But happening in real time with life-altering consequences. Can you imagine for a moment how they must have felt? Oh yeah, you got the Bible, you can read it, you can say, oh, I understand it. But can you put yourself back and think about how they might have felt? 3 years with Jesus, all the good things that were happening, then the death of Jesus, but then the resurrection of Jesus, then Jesus hanging out with them, even coming through walls and doors, eating with them, saying, oh, you don't believe it's me? Touch my side. Touch my hand. Can you imagine what they must have felt as they hear Jesus speak to them here in Acts chapter 1? Can you imagine the tension for a moment? You know, we've been hunkered down. We've been hiding. And now we're told to go out? What's that about? Can you imagine the wondering? But what's this thing about being filled with the Holy Spirit? Oh yeah, I think he talked about that back, you know, John wrote about it. Remember that? He talked about that, I think, in chapter 17 or 15 or 14 or 16. Well, they didn't have Bible, so they couldn't do that. Can you imagine the uncertainty in their thinking? Okay, I understand we're supposed to go into Jerusalem. What's this stuff about Samaria? Excuse me, we don't hang out with Samaritans. They're the scum of the earth, quite frankly. And then, what's this Judea thing and to the ends of the world? How are we going to do that? And this anticipation, I believe, this anticipation, it really paints for us a backdrop to what I call a pregnant question, which is, if you look at the text, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom of Israel? Think about that. Jesus had told them to go and make disciples, Matthew chapter 28. Matthew chapter 4, Jesus had told them to follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Jesus is finally hanging out with them again, raised from the dead, walks through walls and doors. Oh, baby, I can see it happening. It's time to get Israel back. Are you at this time, Lord, going to restore the kingdom of Israel? You can almost hear them say among themselves, you know, as Chris says, Lord, are you at this time going to, are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel? And you can almost hear Dell over there saying, hey, what a great idea. I'm in. You can hear someone else say, in fact, Jesus, why don't you set up shop right here? Why don't you set up shop right here in Jerusalem? Because if you do that, everyone is going to know where to find you. You know, they have to go out into the hills or out by the sea, and they can all come to you. In fact, Lord, we could avoid wasting time. So much time traveling. And we could devote our time to real ministry right here in Jerusalem. And Lord, we could build classrooms. You know, classrooms for teaching. You know, for teaching your followers the lessons that you taught us. And Lord, we could hold some big events. You know, the amphitheaters. If you haven't seen an amphitheater, Google it. It's huge. And let me tell you, the acoustics in there would be phenomenal. Talk about live worship. You know, it'd be a lot easier to go to one of those amphitheaters, Lord. You know, easier to control than those random hillsides or the sea where a storm may come in. And Lord, imagine for a moment the spectacular celebrations we could do at the Jewish feasts. Oh baby, we could capitalize on that stuff. Yet Jesus is reply shows us that he picks up on a deeper implication of what they're really asking, which is really the nature of what it means to follow him. I.e., it's really about the heart and the mission of the church. Yet when Jesus answers them, it almost seems a little bit out of context. No, unless Jesus heard a deeper question behind their question. Lord, are you at this time going to restore Israel? I say that because Jesus' answer to their question about restoring Israel basically is what Jesus said. Nada. No. Instead, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea, and even those people in Samaria, and to the ends of the world. Now again, my paraphrase to this conversation that the disciples asked, Jesus, can we finally set up shop here in Jerusalem? And here's my reply, my way of thinking. Jesus says, no. And you know why? No, because I did not call you to set up some kind of shop to sort of be with people or bring them to you. I called you, if you remember when I talked to you, I know you don't got your Bibles, guys, but think back when I talked to you, because it's going to come out later when John writes the Gospel of John, when I talked about being sent people. I called you to be sent people, not to be people just hunkered down with one another. And I didn't call you to be a community that somehow waits for the world to come to you. I called you to be a band of witnesses going to the world that's all around you. In other words, I called you to be a community of people on my mission. In fact, just as I invited you to come and follow me, remember when I did that? A long time ago, about 3 years ago? I'm now sending you out with my Spirit as witnesses into the world that I created and the world that I love. Well, what are some lessons we can learn from this? I call them discipleship DNA lessons. I call them basically changes in our posture, shifts in our posture. I say that because of the conversation here between Jesus and his disciples in Acts chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. I think it can happen so fast in our minds that we can easily miss the implications of what he says and what he wants us to do. Because in that one statement, where they ask the question and he says no, instead, it's not for you to know the time, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses. In that one statement, Jesus, I believe, he interrupts a great deal of the way you and I think and talk about the church and even about our Christian lives. I say that because Jesus marks us as a people called to live, hear this, called to live outside the comfort zones of our lives and to live instead in redemptive relationship with those outside our religious circles. In fact, we as the church, we were never meant to fortress up. We were never meant to withdraw from a big, bad, hostile world. And you think this world is bad, you think America is bad. Let me tell you, go back to Jesus' days. It was far worse. I don't see anyone here getting crucified and having been crucified upside down even. Maybe overseas that's happening, but not happening here yet that I see. So instead, here's something if you want to tweak this. You and I were rescued, hear this, you and I were rescued to become rescuers. You and I were rescued so we could rescue others. And this first strand of our discipleship DNA, i.e., the heart of our mission, I believe it has challenging implications for each one of us that are here today, as well as every church that calls themselves a Bible-believing church or an evangelical church. And let me say in practical terms, I believe it calls for us, and it calls us to at least 4 major changes in our posture as a church and as Christians. And let me say, these changes I'm going to talk about, it should affect the way we think. It should affect the priorities by which we live. And it should affect the way we relate to the world around us. Let's run through them. We got them up on the board. The first one is a shift from witnessing to a shift to be a witness. Let me say, in understanding this shift, let's remember what Jesus said to his disciples, and let's remember what he didn't say. In Acts chapter 1:8, look at it with me. Jesus says, "You will be my witnesses." Notice Jesus doesn't say, "You shall go witnessing." You hear me? You shall be my witnesses, not that you shall go witnessing. And I say that because, hear me, being something is far different than just doing something. Think of it this way. Before I had my eye operated on, I did a lot of Googling to find out what was going to happen. My biggest question is, when can I run again? Let me tell you, I'm still eating, but I'm not running. Doc would say, just stop eating. Amen. Thank you. But let me tell you, after I had my surgery, there was a far difference between reading about what my eye is going to look like and going, wow, this is amazing. In other words, I'm an eyewitness of what happened to me. Think of it this way. We can go out witnessing, we can share the gospel in word and with material, yet still not be a witness. We can just see it as a task. To me, being a witness is more about building a real relationship with someone than simply telling them something. Building a real relationship with someone and then telling them my story. That's the difference between, to me, being a witness and just going out witnessing. Let me tell you why I say that. Because the actual word that Jesus uses here for witness, the word witness, the actual word is a word that we use to describe an eyewitness. And an eyewitness has a very simple task. They're not responsible to persuade people. They only need to tell the story of what they saw and experienced, hear this, firsthand. Thus, being a witness to Jesus has as much to do with the way we live our lives and the way we love broken people as it does with what we say and what we think we want to hand out. And so I think it's time for the church in the 21st century, especially knowing that we live in a world, we all talk about this. How many of you ever talk about we live in a post-Christian society? Anyone think that? We live in a secular society. It's totally different now than it was maybe in the last 25 years in terms of how we did church and what we did in terms of church. And here's the problem. The culture has changed. The culture is less religious. Yet we're still using the same old methods, thinking somehow it's going to work. Oh, God may, in His sovereignty, bless it. But let me tell you, that's not what it means to be a witness. And so I think it's time to think beyond witnessing as a project or a task and to begin to embrace all it means to be a witness as a way of life. Let me give you the second shift. The second shift is from moving from being members to being missionaries. Look again at Acts chapter 1, verse 8 in your text there. Jesus says, "And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." Now, Jesus added some specific locations, didn't He? And in adding these places, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the world, Jesus is saying being witnesses is about being missionaries more than it is about being members of a church. Now think for a moment how membership works. Membership is about rights and privileges, isn't it? Let me tell you, when I go to the Y and I jump on that treadmill and it's the person before didn't clean it up, let me tell you, I'll go talk to one of the people that are working there. Hey, just want you to know, such and such didn't clean it up. Well, I want you to know that sign that says no cell phones? Well, that guy over there is on a cell phone. And you know, I can say that because I'm a member. I have rights. In fact, I don't want to sit next to him, stand next to him running while he's blabbering to someone about what he did with some girl the night before, or the other guy's over here having an argument with his girlfriend on the phone while he's... And I can do that because I'm a member. I paid my dues. The members focus on goods and services. Membership is about focusing on gaining and keeping and satisfying its members. My friends, that is exactly why and what makes this first strand of our discipleship DNA so revolutionary. Because you and I, we are commissioned to be ambassadors of reconciliation who bring grace and truth to a fallen world. We are not commissioned to be members. Let me tell you why. You and I, as the church, are God's primary delivery system of hope. We are witnesses. And thus, it is a mission, quite frankly, that is bigger than your needs and your wants and my needs and my wants. You know why? Because we exist as Jesus' disciples to be deployed into our city, into our neighborhoods, into our communities in order to reach others for Jesus Christ. And so learning to think like missionaries really provokes a significant shift in the way we are probably grown accustomed to life in the church. Called to be sent ones. You know, we don't just have missionaries that go overseas. We're literally called to be missionaries. The church is a missionary sending business. Each one of us are those missionaries that are sent out to be missionaries with those that are around us. It's not about, well, what's in it for me, Dave? And let me say, the sad thing is that's what we've been taught. Not just in the schools, but in the world and even in the church. What's in it for me? Let me tell you, I have very interesting conversations with people that leave church. People decide not to be members. Well, I don't need discipleship. I've heard that one. I'm like, really? Show me in the Bible where that's true. Well, you know, I don't like your style of worship. No, show me in the Bible where that's an issue. Well, you know, you don't use the King James Version, Dave. Show me in the Bible where that's an issue. Because let me tell you what I'm hearing. It's all about you. It's all about you as a member, not you as a missionary. Let me tell you something else, this concept of being a missionary versus being a member does. But I just mentioned it. In a world that we live in that's all about me. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? It's all about me. People who are about others, they start to stand out. In fact, living as a community of missionaries who prioritize their attention on others who are outside of their own group, it creates a revolutionary change that interrupts the pointlessness of a self-centered and self-absorbed world. In other words, people really see the difference that Christ makes in our lives. They see the difference of a Christ-centered life versus a self-centered life. So we're called to be missionaries more than we're called to be members. Here's the third shift. It's the shift from attractional to the word incarnational. Again, Jesus says here, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, to the ends of the world. I don't know about you, but I think it would be safe today to describe the ministry posture of the American church during the last 25 years as a field of dreams mentality. How many ever saw the movie Field of Dreams? You know what I'm talking about. That is, if we build it, they will come. Well, let me say, we did build it. But for a long time, they didn't come. We work hard at providing quality services, meaningful sermons, special programs, good worship, events that people who didn't follow Jesus might be drawn to. But let me say, can we be honest for a moment? Have you noticed a shrinking number of people who respond to these efforts today? When was the last time that you invited a non-Christian to church and they really showed up? And have you even noticed that the church population has been shrinking as well? Back in the day, and I remember back in the day, people that were even Christians, they usually showed up on Sundays. They made it a priority. Today, here's the new attendance model. They'll show up 1 out of 3 Sundays or 1 out of 4 Sundays, and they think that's good enough. And that's in spite of all the programs and events that are still being provided. Let me tell you the reason that these attractional things aren't working. It's because our culture has changed. In fact, here's a little project. tonight, around 6 p.m. or 5 p.m., call up one of your non-Christian friends. Now, they may be sitting down for dinner, but call them up anyway. And ask them, hey, did you forget to go to church today? Forget what? What on earth are you talking about? And I say that because people, my friends, in our neighborhoods, they don't sit down for dinner on Sunday night regretting somehow that they forgot to go to church again. And the reason is because we live in a post-Christian secular culture, and the people in this culture perceive the church as more than irrelevant. They don't see the relevance of church. Thus, the mandate here of Acts chapter 1, verse 8 declares that our fundamental nature demands an incarnational approach, not a come to church with me attractional approach. Now, I say that because the word incarnational simply means living among them. Isn't that what Jesus did?